It was a hot afternoon. The sun was shining bright, and the streets were busy with people. Cars moved slowly, and everyone seemed to be in a hurry. In the middle of the crowd, a man walked quietly. His steps were slow, and his face looked tired. He was wearing an old army uniform. His shoes were dusty, and his shirt had small holes, but his eyes were calm, full of stories no one knew. His name was Captain Armin. He had served in the army for more than 20 years. He had been to war, saved lives, and lost friends. But today, he was just a man looking for a meal. Captain Armin stopped outside a big shiny restaurant called Royal Flame Cafe. The glass doors were clean. The smell of food came out with every opening. Inside, people were laughing, eating, and taking photos of their food. He pushed the door gently and stepped in. The noise inside suddenly went quiet for a second as people turned to look at him. Some stared at his uniform. Others looked away. A group of teenagers sitting near the entrance started laughing. "Who wears that kind of uniform now?" one boy whispered. "Maybe he's a beggar playing soldier," another joked. Captain Armin ignored them. He walked slowly to the counter and spoke to the manager, a young man in a black suit. "Good afternoon. I'd like a table, please," he said in a soft voice. The manager looked him up and down, frowned, then forced a smile. "Sorry, sir, we're full," he said, though many tables were clearly empty. Captain Armin looked at the tables. "But those seats are empty," he said calmly. "Those are reserved," the manager replied quickly, avoiding eye contact. "You can come another day." The same teenagers laughed again. One of them made a salute with his hand and said, "Thank you for your service, Captain," in a mocking voice. People around giggled. No one stood up. No one said a word. Captain Armin didn't get angry. He didn't shout. He just nodded quietly and turned to leave. As he walked to the door, his back straight and eyes forward, a little girl near the window pulled her mother's hand. "Mommy, why did they treat him like that?" she asked. The mother looked away, but the little girl didn't stop. She got up, picked up a small packet of fries from her plate, and ran toward the door. "Uncle," she said loudly. Captain Armin turned around slowly. The little girl stood in front of him, holding out her fries. "You look hungry. You can take mine," she said with a sweet smile. For a moment, Captain Armin didn't speak. His eyes became wet. He knelt down and gently accepted the fries. "Thank you, little soldier," he said softly. The whole restaurant was silent now. Everyone was watching. But no one moved. No one said sorry. No one clapped. Captain Armin stood up, reached into his pocket, and pulled out an old mobile phone. He pressed one number, a speed dial. The call connected. A deep voice answered. "Yes, Captain Armin?" Captain Armin replied in a quiet, calm voice. "It happened again. I went into a restaurant. They laughed. They refused to serve me, but a little girl gave me her food." There was silence on the other side. Then the voice spoke, serious and strong. "Send me the name and location. I'll take care of it." Captain Armin looked up at the restaurant's name above the door. Royal Flame Cafe. He ended the call and sent a short text message. He put the phone back in his pocket, smiled gently at the girl, and walked away. The girl waved. Her mother finally smiled too. Inside the restaurant, the manager laughed nervously and said, "Probably just an old soldier making drama." But outside, something had already begun. Captain Armin walked slowly down the street, eating a fry from the little packet in his hand. He whispered to himself, "They ignored the uniform, but this world will remember what happens next." The night was quiet. Captain Armin sat alone on a wooden bench near the park. The city lights were glowing behind him, but his eyes were looking at the stars. He slowly finished the fries the little girl had given him. They were cold now, but he smiled with every bite. His phone was silent. He knew the man he called earlier would act, but Captain Armin never liked attention. He didn't want revenge. He wanted respect, not for himself, but for the uniform he wore. As the wind blew gently, his memories began to return. Years ago. Armin was a young man full of dreams. He had joined the army at the age of 22. His parents were proud. His mother gave him a kiss on the forehead. His father gave him a strong hug and said, "Serve with honor." Armin trained hard. He never complained. He wasn't the fastest, but he was the strongest in heart. He never left a man behind. Even in training, he would carry injured friends on his back. His officers noticed. One day, during a rescue mission near the border, his team was trapped in a dangerous zone. Enemy fire came from all sides. A fellow soldier was badly hurt, crying, out in pain. Others wanted to retreat, but Armin didn't move. He picked up the injured soldier and ran, bullets flying past him. He didn't stop until he reached safety. That day, he saved a life. That day, he earned his first medal, but he never told anyone. Over the years, Captain Armin served in the mountains, deserts, and deep forests. He faced heat, hunger, and danger. He saw pain. He lost friends in battle. He carried their bodies on his back when no one else would. But he never gave up. Once, during a flood, he saved a village by building a rope bridge with his team. People called him a hero. News channels wanted to interview him, but he refused. "I just did my duty," he said. But after 20 years, he retired quietly. There were no big parades, no reporters, just a few handshakes and salutes. He moved to the city and started living in a small room. His savings were limited. He didn't want luxury. He just wanted peace. Sometimes people would ask him, "Why, do you still wear the uniform?" He would smile and say, "It reminds me who I am." But the world had changed. Now, when he wore his uniform, people laughed. They thought he was poor or crazy or just pretending. That afternoon at the Royal Flame Cafe, when they refused to serve him, it hurt. Not because he was hungry, but because the same uniform that once saved lives now meant nothing to them. The looks, the jokes, the whispers. They didn't see a soldier. They saw a burden. But one little girl saw a man who was hungry and tired. She saw kindness. That small act gave him hope. Back on the park bench, Captain Armin looked at the stars again. His mind was calm. His heart was full of memories. Suddenly, his phone lit up. A message appeared. "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., Royal Flame Cafe, we're coming." He put the phone down slowly and closed his eyes. "Let them laugh today," he whispered. "Tomorrow, they will learn who I am." The sun was just rising. The streets were still quiet. Shops were closed, and the air was cool. But something unusual was happening behind the scenes. In a high-security office many miles away, a senior man in uniform sat with a serious look on his name was General Feroz. He was the defense minister now, one of the most powerful men in the country. But before power, before politics, he had been a soldier. And many years ago, he had served with Captain Armin. They had fought, side by side. They had shared food, pain, and stories. Feroz remembered Armin's courage like it was yesterday. So when Armin called him, he didn't treat it like a small matter. After receiving the call and text message, General Feroz did not sleep that night. He made calls. He gave orders. He arranged everything quietly. "This country may forget its heroes," he said to his assistant, "but I will not." At 8 a.m. sharp, a group of army officers arrived at the base nearby. Some were in uniform, others in plain clothes. Military jeeps, black SUVs, and one small media van stood ready. The message was clear. They were going to the Royal Flame Cafe. Meanwhile, inside the restaurant, it was just a normal morning. The same manager from yesterday stood behind the counter, scrolling on his phone. He laughed at a meme and told the cleaner, "Don't forget to wipe the glass. VIPs might come today, but not that fake soldier again." The waiter laughed too. "If he comes again, we'll give him water and tell him it's free soup," he joked. They both laughed loudly. Outside, the sun was rising higher. At 8:55 a.m., something strange happened. A black SUV stopped in front of the restaurant. Then another. And another. Then 2 army jeeps arrived. Uniformed officers stepped out. People on the street began to stop and stare. "Is there a raid?" someone asked. "No. They look like army people," another whispered. "The restaurant." Staff looked through the glass and froze. At exactly 9 a.m., the door of the first SUV opened. Captain Armin stepped out. But today, he was not alone. Behind him walked General Faraz, wearing a simple white shirt, but his presence was powerful. 6 other senior officers followed. Everyone in the street was watching. Inside the cafe, the manager dropped his phone. The waiter ran to the kitchen, afraid. The teens from yesterday were sitting in the corner again. Their smiles disappeared. Captain Armin opened the door of the cafe slowly. The bell above the door made a soft sound. He walked in, calm and silent, with the others behind him. Everyone stood still. No one laughed now. No one whispered. The restaurant had become silent. Captain Armin walked up to the same counter. He looked at the same manager. "Good morning," he said in the same calm voice. The manager was sweating now. His lips moved, but no words came out. Then General Faraz stepped forward. "I'm the defense minister of this country," he said in a strong voice. "And this man, Captain Armin, is a war hero. He fought for this land. He saved lives. He gave his best years for this flag." People inside the restaurant gasped. One old man near the window stood up and saluted. The general continued. "But yesterday he was treated like garbage, like nothing. Why? Because his clothes were old? Because his shoes were dusty?" Nobody answered. The general's voice softened. "Respect is not in the clothes. Respect is in the person. And this man deserves your respect." Everyone stood in silence. A woman in the corner wiped her tears. One of the teenagers slowly put his phone down and looked at the floor. Then, something emotional happened. The little girl from yesterday walked in with her mother. She saw Armin and smiled. "Uncle, you came back." She ran and hugged him. Captain Armin bent down and hugged her gently. General Faraz looked at her, smiled, and said, "You were the only one here who showed respect. You have a soldier's heart." The crowd clapped softly. Outside, the media van turned on its camera. Live footage began to stream. Inside, the manager finally spoke, his voice shaking. "Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't know." Captain Armin looked at him and replied quietly, "You don't need to know who I am. You just need to treat everyone with kindness." The manager had no answer. As the camera rolled, Captain Armin turned to General Faraz. "I don't want punishment. I want a lesson to be learned." General Faraz nodded. The next morning, Royal Flame Cafe looked very different. The manager had cleaned every corner. The staff wore fresh uniforms. The tables were polished. The menu was reprinted. The restaurant had never looked better. But behind the clean windows, people were nervous. The events of yesterday were all over the internet. Captain Armin's quiet walkout. The call. The arrival of the defense minister. The powerful speech. And the little girl's hug. Everyone had seen the video. Millions of people were sharing it. Thousands of comments came in. "This made me cry." "Never judge anyone by their clothes." "Salute to the real heroes." "Respect our soldiers." Always. But not everyone was clapping. The owner of Royal Flame Cafe was angry. Inside the manager's office, the owner shouted, "What were you thinking? How could you treat someone like that?" The manager looked down. "I didn't know he was someone important." "That's the problem," the owner snapped. You only respect people if they're rich or famous. Manager stayed quiet. The owner looked at his phone. The reviews for the restaurant had dropped. People were calling for boycotts. Angry messages filled their inbox. Fix this before it ruins everything, the owner warned. By 10 a.m., the restaurant was full of customers, not because they wanted food, but because they wanted to see if something would happen today. Some had their phones ready to record. Others whispered among themselves. Suddenly, a black car stopped outside. People stood up. Phones went up. The manager ran to the door, fixing his tie. The door opened, but it wasn't Captain Armin. It was a young officer in army dress. He looked calm and confident. He walked in slowly, looked around, then smiled. Captain Armin is not coming today, he said kindly. But we have a message. The room became quiet. The officer took out a small paper and read it. This place taught me a lesson, not about pain, but about patience. I don't need free meals. I don't want punishment. I only ask that you treat every man, woman, and child with respect, especially the ones who wear this uniform, because they wear it for you. Captain Armin's some people clapped. Some cried silently. The manager stood still, eyes on the floor. Then the officer added, Captain Armin has requested that this restaurant become a place that serves food to at least 5 poor people every day, free of charge. The owner, who had just entered, stepped forward and spoke clearly. From today, we will serve 10. The crowd clapped louder. Outside, the little girl and her mother stood watching. Uncle didn't come, she asked. The young officer heard her and smiled. He'll be back, when you least expect it. That afternoon, as the sun began to set, Captain Armin stood at a distance, behind a tree. He watched the restaurant quietly. He saw people smiling. He saw a poor man getting a meal. He saw the little girl drawing a picture of a soldier. He didn't walk in. He didn't need to. His job was done. Back home, he placed a small photo on his table, a picture of him with his old army team. Young, strong, brave. He smiled and whispered, The war outside is over, but the war inside people's hearts still continues. I'll keep fighting that one. He looked at his old uniform. He didn't need medals anymore. He needed the world to remember what it means to serve. A few days passed. The world moved on quickly, but the video of Captain Armin still lived in people's hearts. His calm words and silent strength had left a mark. At the Royal Flame Cafe, things had changed. Now every morning, the restaurant gave free food to poor people, just like Armin had wished. A small photo of him in uniform was placed near the counter with a sign. Respect all, judge none. Many people visited the cafe, not just to eat, but to say thank you. Some left flowers near his picture. Some left notes. Some just stood, in silence. But not everyone had learned the lesson. In a school not far from the cafe, a group of students were talking. One boy said, My dad says soldiers are just poor people who couldn't get good jobs. Another replied, Yeah, they're not smart. They only know how to fight. Their teacher, Miss Sana, heard them. She was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled gently and said, Come with me. She led the class to the school hall. A screen was set up. A video began to play, the same video of Captain Armin at the cafe. His calm walk, the disrespect, the little girl's kindness, and the officer's arrival. The students watched silently. By the end, some were crying. Others looked down, ashamed. Miss Sana spoke softly. He didn't ask for revenge. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't show anger. That is real strength. She looked at the students who had spoken badly earlier. Tell me, she asked, what is more powerful, loud words or silent respect? A boy raised his hand slowly. Silent respect, he whispered. She nodded. Correct. And from today, we will all learn to see people with our hearts, not our eyes. At the same time, in a small room across the city, Captain Armin was fixing an old radio. His fingers were slow but steady. The news played in the background. Captain Armin, a retired soldier, has become a symbol of silent strength across the nation. He smiled and turned off the radio. Suddenly, someone knocked on his door. It was the young officer who had visited the cafe earlier. He was smiling. "Captain, I have something for you." He handed Armin a small brown envelope. Armin opened it. Slowly, inside was a letter from the president's office. It said, "Your silence taught more than our speeches. Your kindness changed more than our laws. You are invited to speak at the National Youth Event next week, not as a soldier, but as a teacher of respect." Captain Armin looked at the letter for a long time. He had never spoken to a big crowd before. He wasn't a man of many words. But something inside him said yes. The next day, he walked near a small school playground. Children were playing, laughing. One boy fell and scraped his knee. The others started laughing. Armin walked over, helped the boy up and wiped the dirt from his hands. "Don't laugh at people when they fall," he said softly. "Help them stand. That is respect." The children listened carefully. His words were few, but they stayed in their hearts. Later that evening, he sat under a tree, writing a small note. He wrote, "You don't need power to earn respect. You don't need money to give it. Respect is free, but worth everything." He folded the paper and smiled. His voice may not have been loud, but his message was being heard everywhere. Key elements in Part 5. Social impact of Armin's story reaches schools. Emotional classroom scene teaches children about respect. Armin receives national recognition, but remains humble. Simple acts show his values clearly. Strong message. Without needing drama, the hall was full. More than 2,000 people sat in silence. The seats were taken by students, teachers, officers, reporters, and people from all walks of life. It was the National Youth Event. Every year, leaders, actors, and celebrities gave speeches. But this year, everyone came to listen to one man, a man who had stayed silent most of his life. Captain Armin. He stood backstage, holding a small paper in his hand. He wasn't nervous, he wasn't excited, he was calm, just like always. A young organizer walked over. "Sir, are you ready?" Armin nodded once. On the stage, a host spoke into the mic. "Today, we welcome a man who taught the whole nation what real respect means, without shouting, without asking, without showing anger. Please welcome retired Captain Armin." The crowd clapped. Not loudly, but with emotion. Some stood up. Some wiped their eyes. Armin walked slowly to the mic. No music, no lights, no drama. Just him, his uniform, and his truth. He looked at the crowd for a moment. Then he began to speak in a soft, steady voice. "I was not invited here because I am rich. I was not invited because I am famous. I was invited because I stayed quiet when others spoke with hate. I was disrespected, not because of who I was, but because of how I looked. I wore this uniform for 20 years. I did not wear it to feel powerful. I wore it so others could feel safe. When I was hungry, I was laughed at. When I sat alone, people moved away. When I asked for food, I was told I didn't belong." He paused. "But one little girl gave me her fries. She gave me what the world could not. Kindness without a reason." The hall was silent. You could hear people breathing. We teach our children how to read and write, but we forget to teach them how to see people. Not with eyes, but with the heart. A man in old clothes may be a hero. A woman with dirty hands may be a mother who works hard. A child with broken shoes may walk the path no one else dares to walk. He looked around. Respect is not a gift. It's not a prize. It is a choice. Every day we choose to give it or take it away. He folded the paper in his hand. "I don't want applause. I don't want fame. I only want you to remember, treat every person as if they are wearing an invisible medal. Because many are, you just don't see it. The crowd stood up. There was no music, no clapping yet, just silence. Deep, heavy silence. Then, one young boy near the front clapped slowly. Others joined. The hall filled with soft, emotional clapping. Some were crying. Some were saluting. Some were whispering prayers. Captain Armand stepped back, bowed slightly, and left the stage without saying another word. Outside the hall, people waited. They didn't want selfies. They just wanted to shake his hand. One old man came forward and said, "You didn't just speak today. You made us listen." A little girl handed him a drawing. It was of a soldier standing under the sun, smiling. Armand smiled gently and said, "Keep your heart soft. That's the real strength." That night, the speech went viral. News channels played it again and again. Teachers played it in classrooms. Fathers played it for sons. Mothers played it for daughters. Even the people who once laughed at him watched it and felt small inside. One teenager from the cafe messaged his friend, "I judged him by his shoes, but his soul was something I couldn't even see. I was blind. He made me see." 2 days after the speech, something unusual happened. Captain Armand's small home was suddenly filled with letters. Real letters, not emails, not texts. People from across the country had written to him. Some called him a hero. Some called him a teacher. Some simply wrote, "Thank you." One small boy's letter said, "Dear soldier uncle, I don't know how to salute, but I respect you. I told my friends not to laugh at anyone now." Captain Armand read every letter. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. But one letter made him stop. It was from an old army friend, Major Rafiq. He wrote, "Brother, I saw your speech. It reminded me of a medal you were supposed to get, but never did. Do you remember?" Armand looked out the window, thinking. Yes, he remembered. Many years ago, during a mission at the border, Captain Armand had saved the lives of 5 young soldiers. He had carried one of them on his back while bullets flew around. He was injured. His leg still hurt sometimes. At that time, his senior officer had promised to nominate him for the Bravery Medal. But time passed. The officer retired. The papers were lost. The medal never came. Armand never asked. He never complained. He believed that real bravery didn't need a reward, but now the memory returned. Not with pain, but with peace. That night, he took out an old wooden box. Inside were a few army badges, some letters, and a photo of his team. There was space where the medal should have been. But Armand smiled. He whispered to himself, "This space is full now." The next morning, something beautiful happened. As Armand stepped outside his home, he saw a group of school kids waiting. They were holding a small red box. A girl stepped forward and said shyly, "We made something for you. It's not real gold, but it's real respect." She opened the box. Inside was a handmade medal. It was made from cardboard, colored with crayons, and had the words, "Hero of Hearts." Captain Armand held it gently. No medal in the world had ever felt this heavy, not because of its weight, but because of its meaning. The kids clapped softly. He placed the medal on his shirt and stood tall, not with pride, but with gratitude. A neighbor took a photo. By evening, the photo was everywhere on the internet. People called it the most valuable medal ever given. News channels covered the story again. Celebrities shared the photo and wrote, "We have awards for acting, but this man got an award for living right." Meanwhile, at the defense office, General Feroz looked at the news. He turned to his assistant and said, "It's time we fix our mistake." He signed a document. 3 days later, a letter arrived at Captain Armand's home. This time, it wasn't a thank you note. It was official. It said, Captain Armin is hereby awarded the Bravery Medal for his actions during the 2003 mission at the border. His courage, silence, and patience have made this country proud. But Armin didn't smile because of the medal. He smiled because of the kids, the letters, the respect. He knew now, medals shine on the chest. But real respect shines in the heart. Key elements in Part 7. Emotional flashback to bravery during war. Missing medal becomes a symbol of forgotten respect. Children give him a handmade medal. Pure and beautiful official medal arrives, but it's not the most important moment. Armin values human kindness over titles or awards. It had been 3 weeks since Captain Armin's speech. But the world hadn't forgotten. The video was still being shared. The handmade medal from the children still hung proudly in his room. And the message he gave, respect everyone, judge no one, was spreading across schools, homes, and streets. But Armin? He stayed the same. Quiet. Simple. Humble. One morning, Captain Armin visited a government school. It wasn't planned. There were no cameras, no reporters, no crowd. He just walked into a small classroom where children were studying about history. Teacher was surprised but smiled warmly. Children, do you know who this is? All the children stood up at once. Yes, ma'am. He's the soldier uncle from the video. Armin raised his hand gently and said, I'm just a man who wore a uniform and tried to be kind. He sat on a chair. The children gathered around him. One girl asked, Uncle, do you feel like a hero now? Armin looked at her and smiled. No, Beta. I feel like a student. Life teaches us every day, and I'm still learning. Another boy asked, What are you learning now? He paused, then answered, I'm learning that the world doesn't need louder voices, it needs softer hearts. Later that day, the school principal gave him a small honor, a certificate, a flower, and a glass of water. That was all. But Armin bowed his head with deep respect. He didn't need gold. He didn't need fame. He just needed to know that kindness still lived in people. That evening, Armin walked by the Royal Flame Cafe again. It was peaceful now. A new sign stood outside. No uniform needed. You're welcome as you are. He smiled. Inside, the same little girl who gave him fries was drawing on a piece of paper. This time, she was drawing him. She saw him through the window and waved. He walked away slowly, not because he didn't care, but because he trusted now. He trusted that the world had changed, even if just a little. That night, Armin sat under the stars. He looked at the sky and whispered, I never wore a crown. I never ruled a land. But for once, I ruled hearts. He closed his eyes with peace in his soul. He didn't leave a throne behind. He left something greater, a lesson, a memory, and a message.